Well, good afternoon. For those of you that don't know, my name is Zenovia Harris. I serve as the CEO for the Kent Chamber of Commerce. So on behalf of myself, our staff, our board of directors, we'd like to welcome you to our monthly luncheon. The AG just reminded me it's exactly 1 year since we did this, and so we try to keep things on a cadence, make sure you guys get the information that you need. All right, so we are going to move on to our keynote speaker today. We have the pleasure of having our Washington State Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, talking about retail crime.
Thanks so much for having me back again. I think it was almost exactly a year ago that I was here to talk about organized retail crime, which has become a huge issue all across our state and nationally as well. And so I would appreciate the chance to come back a year later and was asked to give an update on the progress that we're making. So I'm looking forward to sharing all that with you. I do have a few slides. I'm going to move quickly through a complex set of issues, as you might imagine. One thing I will start with, though, is, Councilmember, you mentioned the fentanyl crisis. So not my subject today. But I know folks in this room are intensely interested in the epidemic, what's happening, what we see on the streets, what we see in individuals and families on that epidemic. So the team in my office has filed a large number of lawsuits against some of the largest corporations in the world. These are often Fortune 15 companies, think like Purdue Pharmaceutical, that in our view fueled the opioid epidemic by not playing by the rules. So like Purdue Pharmaceutical manufactures OxyContin. They knew exactly how addictive OxyContin was, despite knowing that from their own experts. When they promoted it to you, the public, or to medical professionals, they downplayed how addictive OxyContin is. You can't do that with any product. So far, just the bottom line update in 30 seconds is the team in bringing those cases has so far made those companies pay $1.3 billion to the state of Washington. The way, when we get those resolutions, the way the money is going to be spent, half the money goes to the state to decide where it goes. It'll all flow down to local jurisdictions, of course, right? It gets flowed down to community, but half the state decides, half is decided by your local jurisdictions, your counties and your cities. I should have come with the exact number that Kent has so far, but it's a number that you'd be familiar with. One thing I wrote in the settlement agreements is the money can only be used by your city or your county or the state to address the opioid epidemic. They can't use it for some other purpose. It can only be used for things like treatment or first responders to deal with what we see in all of our communities. So happy to come back sometime later on if you want a deeper dive on the opioid epidemic, but my team's doing great work on that and did want to share that, Councilmember, since you'd mentioned that. Hey, before I get started, 30-second overview, just so you kind of know the AG's office, who we are, what we do. In a nutshell, we're the largest law firm in the state. 800 lawyers, about 1,000 professional staff, 13 offices all around the state of Washington. It's a big, big operation. Of course, a big part of what we do is we are the law firm for the state of Washington. Every state board, commission, agency, the legislature, the governor, we give legal advice to them. Clients decide what they want to do, just like any lawyer advises you about your personal affairs, your business. Lawyers give you advice. You decide what you want to do. That's what we do for the state. We also, and this will be an example of what I talk about, we also do work sort of directly on behalf of the people. I will be talking about some cases on the criminal context. Most of our office is civil in nature, but I'm going to focus a bit on the criminal work that we do that comes in conjunction with local prosecutors, which I'll talk more about shortly. Okay, so I'm going to dive in. Let's see if I'm doing this correctly. There we go. Awesome. So we created a task force to address organized retail crime 2 years ago. And a year ago, I came to give a quick update on what our progress was after a year. I'll give a very brief refresher on that. And the main focus is what's been happening in the last year. So just a couple points to get us started. So we're not the only state to do this. I think we were the 10th state at the time to create a task force. This is a nationwide issue, as many of you know. And others have followed our lead on that. The task force has met 6 times. This is a group of stakeholders that you would not be surprised by. It's law enforcement, it's online sellers, it's workers, right, who are impacted by this, and a whole range of folks who are engaged on this issue. I want to be clear what we're focused on with this. The focus is not an individual who goes in and steals $8 worth of groceries, okay, or cigarettes. That's not what we're focused on, okay? What we're focused on is organized retail crime. These are very sophisticated operations. They're taking products and then selling them online, for example, which can actually put your health in danger. So, for example, if you are someone who steals baby formula, right, in an organized way, systematic way, baby formula needs to be kept in a certain type of storage, as you can imagine, make sure it's safe. Well, these folks are not keeping it safe. It then ends up online. When you go on to buy something online, you don't realize what's happened, how that baby formally got online, and how it gets to you. So this has all kinds of consequences. But the key thing here is these are sophisticated folks stealing for the purpose of profit, often very significant profit. You'll see that coming up soon. And a key component here for our office and how we engage, it's invariably across multiple jurisdictions. So for example, if you have someone engaging in a crime in King County, we have a King County Prosecutor's Office, right? They can prosecute that case. What we often have, then, what we deal with is it's somebody going across jurisdictions. So let's say it's 5 different counties, rather than have 5 different prosecutors file 5 different sets of charges. If they give us the jurisdiction to bring the cases, we can bring that together and consolidate it and make it far more efficient for everybody. So these are some of the elements that we look for in trying to bring these cases. Here are some of the key goals of our task force. Things you would expect, right? And what I'm going to focus on is the last one in my remarks today. One quick thing I'll say about task forces is task forces occupy a lot of people's time, right? I suspect many of you have been asked to serve on a task force. And nothing drives me more crazy than having a task force and spending time on it, and then nothing ever really happens, right? Some reports get issued and it sits on the shelf and like, well, I did all this work and whatever came out of it, right? So if our office engages in a task force, like I tell my team, our goal here is to have an outcomes. And we're going to report back to people on how we're doing and what the outcomes are. And that's what I'm doing here today, is to share with you, hey, we're asking a lot of folks to spend a lot of their time. You know, law enforcement's busy, they're coming to these meetings. I attend these meetings. Everybody's there. We're asking a lot of them in their time, so we're expecting to get results for the people to make sure we're being responsive and respectful of that time. So here's a key thing that we did. The task force identified one particularly key need that I'm going to focus on, which was resources to prosecute these cases. Hey, your local law enforcement, you're going to be hearing from, I think, in a few minutes, they're busy. They got a lot going on, right? These cases are very resource intensive for investigations. They're often complex cases involving large sums of money. And so we need more resources. With the task force, the members said, we need more resources so folks who can focus on bringing these cases. One thing I want to emphasize in doing that, so a recommendation was, hey, let's create a unit in the AG's office for reasons I mentioned before, because this often transcends jurisdictions. Let's create a unit in the AG's office. In order to do that, we had to go to the state legislature and ask for the resources for the prosecutors, the investigators, all the work that would go into bringing these cases, as you might imagine. One thing that's very important is, I know this seems counterintuitive, but while we have a small criminal division, if somebody breaks into your car, my office has zero authority to charge that person with a crime. I know it seems counterintuitive, the Attorney General, don't you have all sorts of power? Well, that is true in a certain way, but when it comes to crimes, that is your local prosecutor or your city attorney if they're misdemeanors, for example. The way we can charge a case is only if the local prosecutor asks us to take the case, okay? So if Lisa Mannion says, hey, Bob, we've got this situation, we can't bring the case for any number of reasons. We have a conflict or lack the resources. Would you take the case instead? If they ask and we accept, now we can bring the charges. So I just want to be really clear about how this works, that we have to have a referral from a local prosecutor. So we made this request to the state legislature last legislative session. The good news is total success. Business community, stakeholders, online retailers, workers, the public, all got involved, all testified, and we got funding from the legislature to create that team in my office. I won't go through all these folks, but it gives you a sense of the team, the types of folks we have to bring these cases. Ken and Katie in particular are very experienced prosecutors, I can assure you. I won't go through their entire resume, but they are very experienced in bringing these cases. So we've been hiring up since we got the funding from the legislature. So I'm going to talk about a few of the cases. I'm going to focus mainly on this first one, in part because we've now started charging cases. Obviously, in cases we have charged, if there's not yet been a conviction, a prosecutor has to be very careful about how you talk about a case that is still active, right? So I'm going to really avoid kind of going into any details of the subsequent cases. Others have been charged. I'll just zip through them quickly. This first one I can talk a bit about just because the case is over, right? We got a conviction. I can talk about what happened. So this was our first individual that we got a conviction for. And this will just be an example of the kind, this is a very typical kind of case that we're dealing with, just to give you a sense of scale here. So this individual was convicted of 4 felony charges stemming from 28 different thefts of Target stores in Kitsap, Pierce, and King counties in a very short period of time, just over a couple months. So this is typical, multiple jurisdictions, an individual who's taking those dollars, and in this case, it looks like it was electronic items, for example. The thefts totaled $145,000. And that was in a very short period of time, matter of weeks. I think that was just over 2 months that he was able to steal that amount of merchandise. You can imagine with more time, you can do the math on what that would look like. So this was a case that our team, because we had the resource and legislature to create the team, we were able to work with those stores, with law enforcement, got the referral from those 3 prosecutors, asked us to take the case, brought the case, and got the conviction, which is a big success. And that's what we want to see, is success in cases exactly like this. Now, I believe the following ones are not cases that have been resolved yet. So I think we just have the basic facts of what's alleged. I want to be clear, these are allegations. Nothing's been, right? These folks are not convicted. That's super important to emphasize. So I won't editorialize on these, but I just want to give you a sense of the kinds of cases that are being charged right now. So this case, 2 felony first-degree organized retail thefts stemming from 28 separate thefts, Thurston, Pierce, King, Kitsap, Snohomish, Whatcom counties. These thefts, we allege, total over $200,000. The consequences for this theft can be very serious. These folks could face a significant amount of jail time. But again, this is giving you a sense of the kinds of cases that we are bringing. Here's another case. This person, it was eye care products in 4 different counties, totaling $44,000. Another prosecution, and I don't think this is a complete list, by the way, just trying to give you a sense of scale of what we're doing here. This one, total value of the cases, $10,000. I think we have one more here. Another one as well, this one totaling $62,000. So this gives you a sense of the kinds of cases that we're bringing. And one thing I want to emphasize is we really need to work with all of you, right? Hey, if you see something going on, if you're in local law enforcement, hey, talk to my team. I think the last slide will have contact information. So, oh, in fact, this is it. I've got there already. Perfect. So we have a specific email address. That's orcu@atg.wa.gov. Feel free to reach out, right? Phone number as well. So, we do have, while the team is a decent-sized team, it's not massive, right? That we have to be selective in the cases that we bring, and they have to meet the criteria that we've outlined in a very high-level sense. But this is super important that having that connection with the community is really helpful for us. So, hey, retailers can call us up, right, and say, hey, this happened to us. Can you guys take a look at it? We then, of course, have to engage with the local prosecutor, right? There's conversations that need to happen, but don't feel like you have to go through some big process, right? You can go right to my team, and my team can answer questions that you have. So moving forward, the goal is to continue growing that team, continue bringing these cases all across the state, continuing to get convictions, and that will hopefully serve as a deterrent as well. Right? I think for too long when you turn on the news, there just was a sense of, hey, folks are right, you're not right. Folks are just brazenly going in and walking out with thousands and thousands of dollars in merchandise, and what's happening. And I want to communicate that, hey, there are a lot of folks working together on these issues, which are really important to address it. I might also emphasize, hey, the theft is obviously terrible for those businesses. That's lost resources for those businesses. It's bad for the public in the way that I mentioned on products coming online that may not be safe. It is traumatizing for workers and the public there. I left out some details, but honestly, some of what we heard from workers has been, just disturbing what's happened. One worker was held hostage for a while a security person had to shoot the individual. I mean, it's, these are things that someone's just working their job, right? Just trying to work their job and serve their community and get a paycheck to support their family. They should not be dealing with this. The public should not be dealing with this. And so that's why we take these cases very seriously and why we've been having conversations like this all around the state, speaking to chambers all across the state to let them know, working with law enforcement, and just really value your willingness to engage in as well. Hey, if you really want to get involved, our task force meets a few times every year. It's a good-sized group. The public is welcome to attend. So if you really want to engage, feel free to just send that email. Our team is happy to answer your questions. We have materials, we have research, we have things you can do to protect your business. More information you probably want, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all, and my team is happy to help. Thanks again for letting me come back. Next year, you'll have a different Attorney General give you a different update, but I'll still be tracking their progress closely. But I think we've really set up, a really good program in our office that's working well with the community, and I think that's what the public expects, and hope for that work to continue. Hey, thanks again. Hope you have a great day, everybody.
Good afternoon. afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We so appreciate this annual event. I'm so grateful that we could pull together this panel to kind of hit all of the corners as it relates to safety. And as we all know, there's so many different elements to us being safe in our homes and also in our business. So I'm going to start with you, Chief Padilla, and just tell us a little bit about, when we make the call to you, right, and say, can you come and sit on the panel about safety, what is it that you need to say to us as the business community as it relates to safety and what your office is doing?
All right, well, first off, welcome everybody. Thank you for having me again this year. I think this is year 4 or 5, I'm not really sure, but it's always important for me to be here. Madam Mayor sends her regrets. I left her important meeting. We're doing budget workshop stuff today all day. I left her meeting to come here, but she wanted to let everybody know that she's tending to business, and we'll be back at a future lunch. So the first thing I would say, and I don't mean this flippantly, the panel discussion for an hour on safety related to business, I could spend a day. We could talk about so many issues, right, is the first thing. So what I came to do today is kind of share some of the current challenges we're facing, what we're really focused on. And then the best part of the conversation for me is answering your questions, right? What is it that you have questions about? And so I look forward to doing that. If you want, I'll pause right there if you're going to ask the same question. Okay.
So same question, we'll start with you, Chief Carson.
Well, thank you. I also am pleased to be back here again this year. Thanks for having me. I'll highlight just a few things that I would want you to know about Puget Sound Fire. We are very much a regional service provider now. We serve 5 cities and 2 fire districts, and we'll talk about some reasons why I think that makes us better and able to provide better service to you all. But I will also tell you is we are very much Kent-based. Our roots are in Kent. We were the City of Kent Fire Department, then we were the Kent Fire Authority, now Puget Sound, but we still are based here in Kent, and in just a couple months, we'll actually slide our headquarters from the Police and Fire Training Center up on the hill down here to the Kent Valley at our 84th Avenue Business Park. And that's where we've had our training consortium for years. So if you've driven down Central and seen the fire units there, that's what that's about, but we will now have that entire complex. So we'll remain grounded here in Kent for some time to come. 2 programs that I hope to highlight, and I'm sure some of the questions will be geared towards them, so I won't go into great depth now, is our CARES program. We employ 18 nurses and social workers. I think it makes us a very progressive fire department. We have 4 units on the road every day that are non-emergency units looking to respond to the chronic mental health, social structural problems, and chronic medical problems that are in the community. Not necessarily in the intent of keeping our first responders available, although that's a byproduct. The intent is to serve underserved communities, and I think we're doing that well. And we've even partnered with Chief Raff, the Kent Police Department, the Renton Police Department, to be co-responders for them. So his officers have access to those nurses and social workers. Very proud of that. The second, and it's timely, is the growth of our wildland program. And here's where regionalization really matters. We now have a very rural eastern battalion because we go out past Maple Valley. So we have type 3 brush apparatus now of the type that you might see at CAL FIRE, CDF, if you're familiar with them. We have brush trucks, the small 4-wheel drive units. We have water tenders. The resources are stationed out there because that's where the bulk of that need is. But I have to share with you that there is wildland-urban interface risk in Kent. And when you see open green spaces, particularly adjacent to your business community, you are at risk. And so the activities that do or don't happen in those spaces and how you've prepared your buildings matters. We're preparing to respond to those incidents, but going forward, I want to start preparing to prevent those incidents. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. We look at crime in our community, and we all understand that crime's obviously gone up, and it keeps, or at least it seems like it keeps going up year over year. But when it comes to cybercrime and what affects your business, we're essentially seeing the same thing, but exponentially worse. So, from 2019, I looked up the reports from 2019 to 2023. The crime is the uptick in cybercrime has been anywhere from 500 to about 1,100% year over year. So, this is something that we need to be talking about. I have several examples of real world, people in our community, businesses that work with us, and even businesses that don't work with us, and how much time and money they've had to sink into their business after getting affected by one of these, criminals or bad actors. So I'm really happy to have this discussion today. So thank you for having me.
Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Hinds. I'm the Chief Deputy Prosecutor for the King County Prosecutor's Office of our Economic Crimes and Wage Theft Division. I am the poor second. Lisa was actually the invite to this, our elected. She's at a conference out of state and could not make it, so she wishes she could be here, has sent me in her stead. What I would want to sort of, I guess part of why we're here is, number one, just because we care about the crimes that impact both the community, but also our retailers, our businesses, because businesses, particularly small businesses, are the lifeblood of the community, and particularly crimes that affect that. Retail theft, robberies, burglaries, sort of things that fall into my shop are very serious issues, and they are, despite what some people might think or might portray them as, they are questions of public safety. It's a huge concern, and I wanted to be here to answer questions, to convey what it is that we are doing, and in some ways just to sort of hear from you about what it is that you're seeing, what you can convey, and to answer questions. I'll throw out one sort of plug in advance. We, through a bit of a pilot program with the Retail Industry Leaders Association and the Washington Retail Association, have been doing what they've called store walks. I don't know that I love the title, but the idea is that if you want us to come out to your business, I or one of my prosecutors will show up and walk around with you so that you can tell us what you're seeing, give our thoughts, and spend some time with you, your staff, if you are a big enough business to have dedicated loss prevention or something like that, to talk with those folks, because we really want to know what's on the ground. Because as prosecutors, we're a little bit of a removed from what's really happening at any particular point in time. Because by the time it comes to us, a crime has happened, someone's noticed it, they've called the police have investigated it, and it's been referred to us. And so the one thing I can tell you, if you ask me, for example, questions about data, about crime trends, is this crime up? Oftentimes that's really hard for me to answer. I can tell you about what comes into our office, but the one thing I can tell you is for sure is that I know the actual crime rate is lower than that, because at each step in that progression, there are crimes that aren't moving on to the next level of the chain to get to us. And in some ways, we don't know what we don't know. I would love the opportunity to come out, meet with you and your folks, see your space if you have physical space, and talk with you about what's actually happening on the ground.
Thank you so much. So to that end, and I know we have members that have retail property, and this might be for both you and Chief Padilla. When you're saying that it gets to the prosecuting office and you're kind of the last step, right, and now they're in trouble, air quotes, how often is it referred to your office, but then it is maybe dropped or not pursued for whatever reason? The reason for this question is I think businesses want to set themselves up for success and make sure that they're giving the most accurate and complete information to ensure once it gets to your office that they've provided everything that they need in order for the prosecution to happen. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of a percentage, that's almost impossible to answer. What I can tell you is that is one of the most frustrating things as a prosecutor, is to know that a crime has happened to someone, that it's been investigated by law enforcement, referred to us, and that for whatever reason we can't charge it, or that there's some delay in us filing charges. One of the things that we are trying very hard to do as an office is to extend training to both our retail, or I will be more expansive, business partners, as well as to our law enforcement partners about what it is we need in order to put together a case that we can do something with. I'll just give you an example. Attorney General Ferguson was talking about some of the cases that he was. And one of the things I want to flag is that, when you see on those slides, like that there were 28 break-ins and 4 charges filed. Oftentimes what happens there is that under the statutes that we have to deal with, in order to get over the felony level, we are what we call aggregating together. So, you know, a $100 theft by itself would not necessarily be a felony. We add it together with 12 more, we get over to the felony threshold, and that's why you can have 12 events that end up in one charge. The issue that creates, though, is that we still have to prove up each one of those 12 events. And to the extent that people who commit these crimes are paying any attention to the jurisdictional boundaries, it's only because they know it makes things harder for us. Most of the time, I don't think they are paying attention to them. But what you have is 12 different stores, and from each one of those stores, we need the surveillance video if it exists. We need a statement as to what actually happened. We need all of that put together, and each additional event that you have to add in creates one more step where that chain can break. It's frankly a nightmare for prosecutors. I'm going to speak a little bit for Chief Padilla. It's a nightmare for law enforcement as well. It is so resource intensive to put together these cases. One of the things we are trying to do is to work with our business partners, our retail partners, to help explain, here's what we will need from you guys, so that when you call police and someone shows up, you can just hand them this packet of stuff with some understanding, some belief, some hope that makes life easier for the officer. And the more, you know, because the officer's already doing a lot, the easier it can be at each transaction, the less friction, the more likely we are to get to a chargeable case that we can make stick in court. I apologize, that was a very long answer to a much shorter question. And I'll turn it over to Chief Padilla.
Well said.
Yeah, when I look at that question, so a couple of things to know. The vast majority of the shoplifting arrests that made in Canada are misdemeanor level crimes, and they're charged through our municipal court. And I just got our data reports. We're up 35% in the number of case filings we've had to our municipal court from last year. There's a lot that goes into that. Mainly, some of the changes to the legislation have been a big help. Reverting back, and also the fact that we've been stable now for well over a year in our staffing. So more available cops means more response, but still not enough to get to the level where I want to be, which is we get staff so that we're doing preventative presence and not just responding to calls. And you guys have heard me talk about that for many, many years. So the issues there, I think the piece that's missing here, and we're really starting to try and have the conversation, is not so much whether the case gets prosecuted or was it investigated. I think we're maximizing resources there. What's happening is what happens once they're convicted. When it's said there's substantial jail time that comes with that, what is that substantial jail time? Because I think you might be surprised. It's not very substantial in many cases. So there's a total issue here in regards to the accountability piece on the back end, because if there isn't that, what we're seeing, I think what's been a case study for the last 3 years is the lack of accountability makes crime go like this. Okay, so that would be one thing. I love our prosecutor partners. I will say Lisa Mannion has been really focused on violent crime, which is one of the things I want to talk about today. And they're putting a lot of resources to make sure we're addressing the worst offenders out there. But often what gets kind of left out of that in terms of resources are some of our property crimes and our things of that nature. So one-man show. I think there should probably be 10 of him, to be honest. So.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my question. How many in your office? Because I think, you know, when you're a resource, when you have to use that many resources to be able to take someone all the way through prosecution, you're going to need a larger team, and I would imagine you don't have enough folks. And we're happy that our police department is at 100%. I remember when you made that statement a year ago, and they've all graduated from the academy and all that good stuff. So we're good to go.
It looks like a 12-year-old driving around. And again, we're staffed to the budgeted amount.
Yes.
35 more cops yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, well, maybe someone will have some questions. Yes, fully staffed is a good thing. Yes, indeedy. We have a lot of open spaces, like you said here, Chief Carson, here in the city. And so what are some of the I get a lot of calls about, you know, someone maybe starting a fire at their commercial property. And I wonder what are the most common fire safety hazards you encounter for commercial properties, and what proactive measures can business take to mitigate these risks?
Well, I can't state enough that we are seeing in Eastern Washington fire danger problem in Western Washington. I've worked in South King County for 32 years. And in the last 3 years, I have seen fire growth in these open spaces unlike anything we saw previously. And when they declare a red flag day in Eastern Washington, everybody knows to pay attention, right? And my first experience with a red flag day here on the west side of the mountains was not a good one. So I think prevention is the answer. If you have open space, you need to know what's going on inside that open space. And it does bring us back to the topic of homelessness. And that doesn't mean that you have to call every time a cooking fire is started. But we do want to know when there is an unattended fire, particularly this time of year. So if you as a business owner don't feel that you can call 911 and report something like that, I would ask you please to reconsider that. You can, and our fire personnel will go out. And we are not about confrontation, but we are about prevention in those moments. It's understandable that cooking and warming fires take place, but in July and in August and in September, those can very quickly become threats to neighborhoods. As far as things more directly within your control, we have not seen a rash of arson in South King County in some time. But overloaded dumpsters, things piled against the back of your buildings, alleys that have pallets and such, are inviting anyone who wants to be a bad actor. So I think it's an awareness thing for you and your business and your property, and a willingness to call 911 and report something that doesn't look or feel right before it's more than we want it to be.
Yeah. So I have a question. I'm not even sure who can answer this. When you think about it, and you go behind a building and you see all of, you see someone's property, right? To you, it may look like trash, but it's someone's property. As a business owner, what right do you have to move that property, to have someone come and clean up that property? I mean, whose responsibility? I see you, Chief. Whose responsibility is that?
So you have a right to control your property and to not have property that's on there or have people that's on your private property. We want to make sure that when we're dealing with that, so if you have that issue, we'd ask that you call. You can use a non-emergency number if it's an ongoing thing. If it's in progress and you need it dealt with sooner, please call 911. Our response times in that have come a long way. I've been able to backfill our special operations unit, and that's our team. Those of you who've heard me speak before, that's our team that does predominantly our homeless engagement outreach. And so if this is property from one of our unhoused people, we'll go there, we'll bring resources, we'll offer whatever we can. We'll bring our FD care co-responders there if there are mental health issues. We'll try and get them placed, but ultimately, you have a right to be free of that property and or person, and we will ask them to move. If they decide not to move, then at that point, we may be stuck with enforcing the law. But I will tell you that's very rare. We don't make a lot of trespassing, because that's what it would be, trespassing arrests. It's very few. Most people either move along, and some people actually take the assistance that we offer them. So we encourage you, if the concern is we don't want to criminalize someone who's unhoused, who's leaving property on your property, know that one of the best ways to get them resources is actually to pick up the phone and call, because we've staffed it, we've partnered with our fire department, and we connect people. It's happening every week. So.
And that's the non-emergency number, not the 911.
I'm going to get in trouble with my dispatcher here. If you get confused, call 911. It goes to the same place. Okay, it goes to the same place. The difference is when it comes into the non-emergency line, it falls behind the ones that are in queue for 911. Okay. So, but it goes to the exact same place, same call receiver. It gets dispatched from the same place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, being proactive about it is really important. I see a backpack and I'm like, I don't see anybody. Can I put this in the trash? Am I now going to be in trouble for throwing out someone's backpack because it's in front of my business? So thank you so much for that answer. Raj, I'll go to you. As you said, what was the number? 500 to 1,100. It has gone up. Every day, probably 3 or 4 times a day, and I can't be the only one, we get emails that say, hey, I need to change my direct deposit. Can you send me that information as soon as possible? Or, hey, this invoice is unpaid. Can you click this button and pay this invoice? Can you talk to us a little bit about the preventative care and nature in which we need to take as it relates to email crime?
Yeah, I need a little bit of participation here. Julie, can you pull the microphone? Yeah, Julie, can I have you stand up? And then, there you go. And then the table in the back, please stand up with the superintendent. Yes, and that table right in front of you. Everybody stand up.
You said now, John.
I need you two, actually. Can you stand up, Teresa and Taylor? So look around. Statistically speaking, out of this room, this is about the number of people that have been hacked or compromised, and they don't even know. It takes about 6 months before a cyber criminal actually shows you what's going on, and that's usually when they want to show you that they're there. So, cybercrime is a thing. You may not have been impacted so far, and that's, it's just a matter of when, not if. Oh, sorry, you could sit down. Yeah. So one of the biggest things is knowledge. It's actually knowing what's going on in your environment. So most of the time when we encounter somebody that's already been breached, so a breach is when somebody infiltrates your system, and then a compromise, and you'll hear me use both of these words. A compromise is what they actually do with your data. So I'm going to name off some companies here. So AT&T, T-Mobile. If you are with AT&T or T-Mobile, please raise your hand. If you've been with either of those companies, please keep your hands up. If you've been with those companies in the past, whenever, raise your hands as well. So every single one of you, you've had your data stolen. Well, your metadata has been stolen. So what's happened is the cyber criminals at this point know who you've been calling, who you've been texting. So all those messages, all those calls that you were getting, expect to get more, because now they know who your favorite person is, who you spend most time with. They don't know what you talked about. They don't know what you've said in those messages, but they know how many times you've messaged mom, and how many times mom's messaged you. So now it's really, really easy for them to spoof mom and message you and say, hey, I need your help with this. Well, of course you're going to click things and pay attention if it's your mom. Well, I like my mom. I have a good relationship with my mom, so maybe I should have used somebody else. But when mom calls, I answer. And I actually had an incident. I was in Africa for a month last year and did a lot of travel and motorcycle riding, and I didn't have cell phone service. So before I left, I let my relatives know, hey, I'm going to be out of the country and I'm not going to have cell phone coverage. Well, at some point, my aunt, my dad's sister, got a call, and she couldn't recognize the person's, who it was. So she's like, oh, is this Raj? And he goes, yeah, this is Raj. And she goes, aren't you supposed to be in Africa? And he goes, yeah, I am in Africa. In fact, I'm in jail. I need money. So, she's panicked. She's trying to call me. Of course, I'm not answering. And then at some point, my dad stepped in and was like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with them. If he was in jail, he would call me first. So, these are things that are getting much worse with technology. Now we have AI. Artificial intelligence is just going to completely take cybercrime and exponentially make it worse, if that's even a thing. But now they can fake everything, and they can do it in a split second, versus what they used to have to do was create programs and go through elaborate systems. They no longer need to do that. So, there's just so much going on. So many of these companies are negligent with your data. In fact, if I have to put in my data into any third party, so if I go and register, and I'm going to pick on Kent Chamber, if I go and register with my email and my password, I assume that Kent Chamber either has been compromised or they will be compromised. So what I do is, instead of using my work email and my only password that I use for Kent Chamber, for my banking and for my other email services, you can no longer do that. You have to have multi-factor authentication. Assume every single password you've used has been breached. It is out in the open. Now they know about your phone calls. United Health was compromised. They lost over they paid over $22 million in ransom, and the bad actors still leaked their data. So, now if you were a United Health member at any point, or a patient, or were in their system, all of your records have been stolen and sold. So your prescriptions you take, your diagnosis, your doctor's visits, all that data was stolen and is being sold. Our national vote registry has been hacked. I mean, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, all those. So the bad actors at this point know who you voted for, who you're registered to vote for, what your mortgage payment looks like, how much money you owe on your credit cards, what prescriptions you take, what kind of car you drive. I mean, they have more information on you than you probably, they know what subscriptions you're signed up for, most likely more than you do. So, this is reality now. This is what we have to live with. And the best thing that I can tell you is you just have to be aware. You have to know that, just like if I'm walking into a dark alley in Seattle or in Kent at 4 a.m., I'm going to take extra precautions. First of all, I'm going to avoid it if I can. So, take precaution. Make sure you're doing, you're treating your digital life in a way where you actually know where your data is going. And if you are using, and if I'm signing into Kent Chamber, I'm not going to use my normal password. It's a throwaway password. So that way they can have whatever I have at Kent Chamber and nothing more.
My name is Shelley and I'm with Serpro. We go to fire and water restoration and reconstruction company. And there was a fire in South Seattle I went to a few weeks ago. As I'm walking up to the building, there was a car right in broad daylight during the day, during the week. 5 people inside this car were doing drugs. I don't do drugs, so I don't know what they were doing, but there was tin foil and a lighter. So I was meth, thank you. So apparently meth in broad daylight. I'm not only an employee from a great company, I'm a concerned citizen, and I want to know, as a citizen of this country and of this state, what can we do about drugs being done by, just open in the air, everyday drugs from people? Can they be arrested? What's going on, and why can't we stop the drug use in this state?
Again, we need like a whole day. So I'll hit on the highlights. First, I want to say that if that was in Kent, the answer is yes, they can be arrested, and yes, they will be arrested if you call. Our resources are stretched. Sometimes we don't get there on time. But if you think back 2 legislative cycles ago, we were in the phase where basically the laws legalized open use of drugs, right? We all remember that history. That caused a big issue. That's when you started seeing just people blatantly. I literally walked by a guy with a meth pipe that big on Central Avenue. I was in uniform, and when I stopped him, he looked at me and he goes, "You can't stop me." And you know what? He was right. Probably one of the more frustrating days in my career. But that's changed. This city adopted an ordinance that made open drug use a misdemeanor crime, right? We were the first in the state. A lot of cities started to adopt that. And that caused the discussion in our state legislature to do something about it. They did. So now we are back to where open use and possession of illegal narcotics is a crime, but it's a misdemeanor crime. Okay, so that means the burden went from the King County courts and prosecution and defense to municipal courts. I will tell you it's very expensive, and we got 0 funding from the state on that. But it's important to our community, it's important to your businesses. We understand as a city that open use of drug use like that and the gathering in your workspaces deter customers from coming here. Raj just said he's extra careful in a dark alley at 4 a.m. I'd say, Raj, don't go out after midnight, it'll be better for you. But it's true, right? We just had a homicide, or almost near a homicide, in Joanne Fabrics on the East Hill, okay, up in the shopping center. And so we understand that these violent crimes and drug use and all these things impact your businesses. We want to address it. So where the law is right now, it is a misdemeanor crime. We've made hundreds of arrests already. This isn't something I'm proud of, but we have to do something. And what happens to our cases is those are automatically deferred for treatment. The data's not complete yet. We're studying it. We are starting to see some people actually take treatment and go through that process, but I believe the data is going to show that most people are choosing jail time over treatment so they can get released. And why do they want to get released? So they can go back and start getting their drugs again. So we're trying. We're working really hard. If you're in Kent, call us. I do want to say, and this isn't a slam on Seattle, I don't know how they're addressing those issues in Seattle. I know that, we seem to be really quick on adopting new laws that help. And so I don't know where they're at on that. So call 911.
Add to that?
Yeah.
Can we include marijuana to that, or marijuana is not included?
If they're using marijuana in public spaces like parks and things, that's against the law, but no.
It's important to note, I just want to add, the drugs being used are different today than they were a few years ago. They are much more powerful, much more addictive, and much cheaper. And that is a terrible combination. So we respond to overdoses with the Kent Police Department and the Sheriff's Department, the Tukwila Police Department every single day. And we see people, to Chief's point, who are resuscitated, who weren't breathing, who are very angry that we interrupted that high. Such is the power of the drug that they're on, right? So I want you to be real clear with yourselves. And if there's anyone in the room who doesn't know someone who's touched by the opioid epidemic, good for you. You probably, unfortunately, will soon, because this is different than it was before. Chief Raff and I responded to heroin overdoses and saw opioid issues, throughout the 90s and throughout the 2000s. It wasn't what it is today with the power of fentanyl.
Right. I had a client, actually, I see you, Larry. I see you. We had a client who unfortunately was teaching a class. They had a workshop and folks are coming in and someone had an overdose. And if it weren't for one of the other participants in the classroom, they had a, what do you call it? Narcan. And, but that business at that moment realized how open they are to something like that. So for those of us who gather people at our location for whatever reason, how would we as a business, knock on wood, I don't want to have to use that, but if I did, I would not be prepared and I would have to let the person pass in my office. And so what is the process, or is there a process in which businesses can request Narcan for their office?
Yes, you can get Narcan for your office, and in fact, there are schools in the state of Washington that have Narcan in the classrooms. I don't know that necessarily that is something that you do or don't want to do. It's a very personal decision that you're going to make, but I can tell you that in Kent, all the fire units have Narcan, Medical One has Narcan, all the police units, all the sheriff's units have Narcan, all the school nurses have Narcan. So it's really where you want to insert yourself in that process. We have a leave behind Narcan, so if we're at your place of business on an incident like that, and you want to be in a different position the next time, we can give you Narcan. Our CARES unit also has fentanyl swabs. So if you're concerned that something you've been given has fentanyl in it, we have fentanyl swabs that can do a quick test kit on that. There's too many different ways to get addicted to opioids, and it can happen to folks without any intent when they consume something that wasn't what they thought it was.
Yeah, perfect. Jolene?
My name is Jolene Kenny. I'm the Executive Director of Metro Washington, and this is my nonprofit that does youth mentorship services. What I hear, even in this room and often from communities, is that the opposite of hope is apathy. And there is a lot of apathy around what we can do about the drug crisis in our communities. And while I've heard prevention mentioned a few times here, I would strongly encourage us as a community, we cannot live in apathy or nothing will change. So what can we do? I hear a lot of, we react to this with 911 calls, we react to this, and that's your goal, right? But what else can we do to be more preventative and make sure the people who are addicted, that is one set of problems. What can we do to further prevent our young people and more families from even entering that path to begin with? And I'm curious in your own bodies of work, is there even space for you to think about that? How can you partner with community-based organizations to make that more hopeful and less apathetic?
Yeah, and thank you for that. If you're hearing apathy, I would say that it's not conveyed. Yeah. Well, I think what you're hearing is frustration, right? I think we all recognize the humanitarian need to help people in this. I think where the divide is that on what's the approach for it, right? When we introduced our bill, our city code, it required mandatory treatment. So what Chief Carson said is exactly correct. A young Raf Padilla in 1998 got paid to go and buy drugs in downtown Hawaii. And I bought crack because it was the end of the crack epidemic, and I bought meth because it was the emergence of the meth epidemic. And I thought I would never see an affliction worse than that in my time. I would take crack and meth back tenfold over fentanyl. Fentanyl is a game changer. The lethality of it is so intense that I feel we are not meeting our responsibility to help people, and that includes the opportunity to help them by compelling them to get help. It is nearly impossible to get off fentanyl and kick it by yourself. It's that controlling, and it's dangerous to do that without medical assistance at its side. You can die from coming off of fentanyl. A lot of our near deaths in our institutions are a result of that exactly. So that's the deal. In terms of prevention, we've got multiple partnerships going, and that's it is a little bit outside of our lane. But I think one of the things is we need to look at our systemic approach to how we're messaging it. If you look at some of the messages in King County alone, I don't think we're saying strongly enough, this will kill you, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But we are sending messages like, if you do it, make sure you have a partner with you with Narcan. That's a government message being sent right now. And when our young people see that, I think it's a confusing thing. So I would look at what are we saying about it, and in addition to how we're approaching it, right? There's a lot of people that beat up on DARE and beat up on Say No to Drugs. You know what? I'm 53 years old, and I remember Say No to Drugs, and I remember DARE. So I'm not sure that it was a complete failure, but I think the messaging has to be, and you see this in some of the national campaigns, it is a one-time thing that can kill you. And we need to convey that, because that's the truth. You have something on that?
I would just add that there are no recreational fentanyl users. That's not a thing. It is not akin to marijuana. It is not akin to alcohol. To Chief Raff's point, eventually these folks will overdose and they will stop breathing. Guaranteed. So,
To that point though, the key supports that you and I had when we went through DARE in the 70s and 80s, they're different than what young people experience as communities today.
yeah, and I love your question. I can't help but think of it through the lens of a dad, right? Instead of through the lens of a fire chief. And I don't know that our young people understand what they're getting into when they agree to try something that is handed to them, because that moment is life altering.
100%.
Yeah. And I think too, Jolene, maybe a conversation with superintendent about what they're doing at that level. They have children for a very long time, right? Of the day. And maybe what does those partnerships look like to bring in school district, to bring in folks who can use non-governmental language like a chamber. We don't have to use that type of language. We can say drugs can kill you instead of bring your Narcan with you. And so maybe a conversation about that. We are having, Linda, I see you. Thank you so much for being here, Councilwoman. But we are having a nonprofit, a nonprofit meetup. And that's a really great conversation about what those nonprofits can do. And maybe if they can bring some solutions back to this panel, prosecuting attorney, everyone. And even, again, Raj, what does that campaign look like? What does social media look like? Kids are there all the time. So what does that messaging look like as well? So I have you here. Yes, Charles.
Charles Bordy. I work with Valley City Behavioral Health. We are a substance use disorder and mental health clinic here in King County. Not really trying to be commercial, but we are hosting an informative event on fentanyl and fentanyl later this month. I'm talking later to make an invitation to that. I'd like to know, since I heard you talk about the treatment or the choice between treatment and jail. Washington State has an involuntary treatment law, and specifically Kent has a involuntary treatment center through us, through Recovery Place Kent. So I'm kind of wondering about your process through using Ricky's law to take somebody to get somebody to a designated crisis responder and to make that call to get them to treatment. Because I think we both know that somebody high, especially on fentanyl, isn't in a position to make that call for themselves a lot of the time. So I'd just like to hear more about how
Yeah.
Police Department.
Right. So I want to highlight, I agree with you 1,000%. They're not going to voluntarily do this. And I want to go back a little bit to the comment about the choice to use fentanyl or carry fentanyl in your businesses. Something to understand, and Chief Carson touched on this, when they recover from the Narcan dose, a lot of times they're angry. So just know that. You got to do your own risk analysis there. At the very least, call us. We've had Narcan in the cars for years, and we get there as fast as we can. They're a priority call to save a life, okay? So the ITA process has issues. The resources are incredibly low. To get a crisis responder out to a call generally is a 2 to 4 hour wait during operational periods. And at that point, the person who's recovered from fentanyl in particular is free to get up and leave, because I can no longer articulate under the law that they're a danger to themselves, because they've been medically restored and able to walk away. So there's where it happens. Now, there was permission given through the governor's office to our EMTs to administer, let's call it a stabilizing drug.
It's a really long word.
Because what we're realizing, so where I think we're trying to get some traction, it's going to be led by our firefighter partners and our EMTs, is that we realize during that window when they're recovering and they want to leave, if they get this stabilizing drug, I'll get the name for you, Suboxone. What we're being told by our emergency medical responders is that it normalizes them a little bit to where they're seeing windows of opportunity to get them to go to treatment. It's still voluntary, it's not involuntary. The standards for involuntary commitment, as they probably should be, are very high. And most of our people who are recovering from a fentanyl overdose are not gonna meet that standard. And even if we get a DCR to the location, after the evaluation, our experience is over 90% of the time they get released back out. So they're not getting committed to your resources.
So it sounds like what you're suggesting is that maybe one of the things we could do, at the private citizen level, is to push our legislative process.
Right. I think there's a lot of opportunity for solutions there, and I want to be clear. And I take for granted people know me, and maybe I shouldn't. The reason we're pushing incarceration is because we know that's an opportunity where we have the ability to compel treatment. The King County Drug Court does make an impact. The problem is they're not getting referrals anymore. I just got a letter sent to me. I'm not making this up for the purposes of this lunch, I swear. Just got a letter sent to me last week from a person who had graduated from King County Drug Court, lifelong drug user, thanking my officer, Officer Ian Lentz, for his role in intervening and getting him connected through drug court through basically being arrested. And it sounds really cruel. It sounds like we just want to put people in jail. I assure you, our approach is if they complete drug treatment, their arrest record and their conviction record should be completely expunged, because the goal is to get them treatment. That's where we're at.
Yeah. We have time for one more quick question. No pontification. Larry? Yeah? Sorry, it's our last question. Sorry, Doug.
Both chiefs, thank you so much. You guys all the time. It was awesome. It was awesome. Last week, did an auction this morning at 7:30. Response. Appreciate it. I do have some trepidation by my managers calling 911, having people removed from the property. They're concerned about retaliation. They're going to come back and we've had meetings, so it's unbelievable, it's locked. But on a bigger issue, going to 30,000 feet, you mentioned we need 30 more officers. 35.
Don't short me those 5.
Get that recorded, 35. So is there a possibility to do a PPP, a public-private partnership, on funding for special activity groups that are homeless-based? I don't even know how the politics work, so.
Very interesting you should mention politics, because we are in election season. So thank you for this question. I was hoping it would come up. And for the record, I know we're time crunch. I'll say after and answer questions. I do got to get back to the mayor's budget process. So real quick, the problem so the answer is no, we can't do a private public venture. The longer answer is this. We need to find a sustainable funding sources for not just law enforcement, but the public safety initiatives. We're talking our courts, we're talking our prosecutors. Unfortunately, our defense attorneys too are in there. I'm kidding. But we need to look at the entire system because it's underfunded. You guys have seen I don't know how many campaign ads I can watch in a day, but I'm glad there's getting some attention to the fact that we are at the bottom of the country in officers per resident. Here's the news that you may not know. That's not a new stat. We're running at 12 plus years that we've been at the bottom, okay? And so we have sustainable funding for a lot of critical infrastructure in our state. We do not have sustainable funding for law enforcement. So when you hear people say that we want to give grants for cities to hire officers, know that doesn't work, because I think that officer wants to get paid for the rest of his career and not the first time that they get hired for the first year. So we need a sustainable funding source. And last year, this city proposed a process that would get us there through a sales tax increase. Councilmember Boyd is here. He supported that initiative, supported the legislative priority. Unfortunately, that bill never got even out of committee for a vote. But it's election year, and so I'm going to be cynical here. Everybody's campaigning on public safety. I dropped the mic, but it's not my mic.
Well, that unfortunately, that's the last question. I know we had a few questions here, but like you said, they're going to try to stick around to answer some questions. From a chamber standpoint, where we're looking at and we're thinking about, sometimes we're trying to solve the same issue, right? But we're just looking at it differently. So when I hear, a person can steal $100 from one store, another store, we're thinking from a business owner, how many times can I lose $100 in my store to 10 different people, right? Now it's 1,000 for me, but 100 for them. And so I think the advocacy around that, we need to really look at the numbers so that we are really solving the true problem and we're working together. Because do we want people to go to jail for stealing a 1-cent candy? No, but if 10,000 people come steal my 1-cent candy, now I'm out 10,000. You see what I'm saying? And so we will definitely be hosting events as it relates to advocacy and legislation, and folks are standing very tall on public safety, and we have some wonderful questions if you need help with fielding those conversations. So again, thank you all very much for being here. We appreciate everything that you are doing for the community, and we just want to keep you in mind or let you know that the Chamber is always here to support, and we always have an opinion. Yes? Yes. Thank you.